Lowell and Mayor of the City of Lowell, the best job in the city. I actually had the best job. Headmaster Lowell High School, but being mayor's second best job. I think you're going to find this to be an interesting night. First of all, I really want to thank the city manager and her staff, and Christine and the city solicitor's office for doing a good job putting together this program. I think there's been a lot of discussion as to this voting rights issue. But the thing is, it's important. I think the information you get tonight, you'll realize how important it is, and you realize the work that was put in by the Lowell City Council, and the managers and the solicitor's office. First of all, I'd like to introduce Councilor Jim Milanazzo is here. Councilor Rita Mercer, and Vice Mayor Vesta Miller. Oh, there he is. He hides him. Okay. And Councilor Rodney Alley just came in. But this the suit that we had was something you look at and say, okay, something has to be done. But I really do want to commend the City Council because they worked hard. There was a lot of discussion that went on about this, and it was a long road to get to where we are. But I think tonight you'll find that it was well worth it. So I'd now like to turn it over to City Solicitor Christine O'Connor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. With us this evening is Theodore Arrington, and he is a retired professor from the Political Science Department at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. He served as an expert in more than 40 voting cases, including the seminal case of Jingles. His area of expertise include electoral behavior, the design and administration of electoral systems, redistricting, and compliance with the Voting Rights Act. He's been involved in redistricting cases in over a dozen states and has been retained by various governmental organizations and nonprofits such as Common Cause, NAACP, the ACLU, as well as the federal courts and the U.S. Department of Justice. After his presentation, which will be under an hour, we'll have a Q&A period, and we also have translation services. If they could raise their hands in the back and maybe stand up. We have from the CBA, Niall Espinola, and from the CMAA, Wee Sol Chin. And with that, Ted?
Chris, can you just ask if anybody needs translation services?
Thank you, Christine.
If they can identify.
Sure, if anyone needs translation services, you can identify and they will assist you at one of the tables. Spanish and Khmer.
The translation services for my southern drawl are not available. I've seen a lot of Lowell the last couple of days. You are really fortunate to be. It's a lovely city. And I can tell you that I have been to meetings like this before in much bigger cities and we didn't get half this turnout. So you're very civic-minded. Let me start by clarifying my role, because I don't want any misunderstanding. It is not my job to tell you what kind of election system we should have. It's not. And I've never tried to do that. I'm a statistical expert in voting rights cases. And my job has been simply to tell the City Council, and now you, some of the facts. What you do with those facts, what you advise the City Council to do, and what they decide to do, that's up to you. This is your city, and I'm sure you will make a good decision. But I believe that we have a number of different options on the table, which could actually improve your election system. So it's not just complying with the Voting Rights Act, it's making things better. Yeah, come on.
Can everyone hear?
Are you sure? Is that better? This microphone is very sensitive. You've got to be right up here. And then if I say Peter Piper, pick, pet. See what that is? Okay. Next slide. Okay, now we're aware that many of you are up to date on what's happening. And you're just here to hear about the options. I understand that. But there may also be some people here who really haven't kept up. In my college, you haven't done your homework. So we're kind of go over what's happened so far, and that's number 1 through number 6. Relatively rapidly. I won't talk too fast, but relatively rapidly, because I know that's repetitive for some of you. And then we'll spend more time on 7 and 8. So as you see, we're going to look at what was the lawsuit, what was that all about, what is the Voting Rights Act, what constitutes a violation of the Voting Rights Act, or I would really, it's better said, what are the circumstances in which your election system happens to not be in accord with it. It's a better way to say it. It's said as a violation, but that gives the wrong impression. Why change? What is the settlement? The timeline on the settlement, and then we're going to look at the options and potential advantages and disadvantages to the different systems. Okay, now as most of you know, the lawsuit was filed in May of 2017 by Asian American and Hispanic Latino citizens in Lowell under the Voting Rights Act. So that really starts the process. And they're saying they believe that the system is not in accord with the Voting Rights Act. And they filed that with the courts. They were challenging Lowell's at-large plurality municipal system under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Okay? There are many different sections of the Voting Rights Act, but this kind of action is done under Section 2. They allege that that the current system impermissibly dilutes minority voting strength. Now, I know you all know what dilute is. You put a little bit of something in a glass, you put a lot of water in it, you've diluted it. It's the same idea. There are minority citizens, and they feel that this system, because most of the voters are white, dilutes their vote, and they end up not having an equal opportunity to participate in the political process. And that's language from the Voting Rights Act. Its intent is that everybody should have an equal opportunity to participate and an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. The Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. President Johnson signed it. It's really the first important piece of voting rights or civil rights legislation in decades. And many people consider it to be the most important act. The year before, they had passed the Civil Rights Act, which had many provisions and was very important. But a lot of people in politics think that assuring the vote for everybody is really more important than trying to pass laws to govern how people behave with each other. That may or may not be true. But in any case, the Voting Rights Act prohibits voting systems that result in dilution of minority voting strength. In order to implement that, somebody has to bring a suit. In many days, it used to be the Justice Department in Washington. These days, they don't do much of that, so it's really up to individual civil rights groups and individuals in the community to bring it up. In other words, a system may not be in compliance with the Voting Rights Act, but it would just go along until somebody challenges it. And so it becomes a court action. Minority groups must have reasonable opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. And as a political scientist, let me remind you that what we're talking about is opportunity. We're not talking about seats that are automatically allocated to people. We don't in this country automatically allocate seats to anybody. If you want to be elected, you got to run. But you need an opportunity. It has to be possible for you to win. Okay, now what constitutes a violation? To determine whether the electoral system violates Section 2, you look only at statistical analysis, which is what guys like me do. I'm not a lawyer. I sometimes pretend to be, but I'm not, okay? But my job is to do statistical analysis. I give the courts statistical information, and the statistical information that's required for this kind of case is well established now with hundreds of cases, many of which have been affirmed by the Supreme Court. All of the data we look at is public data. It's of two kinds. Census data from, in this case, the 2010 census, and your election data. That is the data that's collected every time you vote by your election commission. Remind me what it's called? Election board? Election commission, okay. They keep the historical records. How many people voted, in which precincts did they vote, how many votes did they give for each candidate. So those are the two kinds of data that are basically used for this kind of analysis. The original case, which established what you have to do when you're challenging an at-large election system, and that's what you have. All of the candidates are elected at large. Simple voting, the ones who get the most votes, the 9 who get the most votes. That case was the Jingles case. I was an expert witness in the Jingles case. I'm going to be modest here. I was not the expert witness. That was somebody else. But I was there. And that counts for something. In the Jingles case, they set forth a 3-pronged test, which we call the Jingles preconditions. And geographically compact to constitute a majority in a single-member district. Now, the reason for that is that if the judge were to find that the at-large system is not in compliance, then there would have to be a remedy. There would have to be some way to fix it. Well, if the minority group is not sufficiently large to form a compact district, then there may not be any way to fix it. So that right away the court would say, it may be in violation, but what am I going to do? Because you see, the only thing the judge can impose without an agreement from plaintiffs and defendants is a single-member district system. And if that wouldn't fix the problem, then there isn't a resolution, no reason to go forward. Secondly, the minority group has to be politically cohesive. In other words, the court is saying, look, there has to be something that the minority voters want to see represented. And if they're not voting for the same candidates, then they don't share the same values. There's nothing there to represent. But if they're cohesively voting for the same set of candidates, then they are trying to say something, and that something needs to be represented. And then third, the majority votes sufficiently as a block, the white majority is what it means, sufficiently as a block to enable it to usually defeat the minority's preferred candidates. So that even though there are a fairly large number of minority voters, large enough to form a majority in a single-member district, and even though they're voting cohesively for the same candidates, those candidates usually are defeated. And if those three things are present, those called the Jingles preconditions, if those three things are present, the plaintiffs always win. Now, political science, social science, you never say always, do you? Usually, more time than not, all of those squeegee words. There may be an exception, but I've been in this business for 35 years. I have never seen a case or heard of a case. There may be one, but I've never heard of a case in which the three preconditions were established and the plaintiffs failed to win. There's more to it than that. There's more for experts like me to be employed doing. But if you've got those three, it's a lock. That's just the way it is. And when you look at the logic of those three, you can see why that's true. Okay, so with that as a background, then the next thing is why make change? Well, the plaintiffs presented their case. It took a lot of discussion for the city council to convince them to go ahead and present their case, because they could have waited till trial. But the city council convinced them to do it. They had me double check it to find out they'd used the right data, they'd used the right techniques. I replicated some of the things that they had done to say, yep, the plaintiffs have done it correctly. And I give an opinion. I'm not going to tell you how to change your system, but on the statistical analysis, I can give you an opinion. That's what I do in court. And my opinion was that the court would say that they have established the 3 preconditions, and you can't win. You can go to court if you want to. You can spend millions of dollars, but you won't win. And I know in places where they did fight it out, it divided the community. Okay? So you have to consider not only are you very, very likely to lose, but you'll divide this community. Moreover, as we discussed it, I think some members of the city council, maybe all of them, began to see that there are some advantages from some of the alternative systems which plaintiffs would accept, which also might make the system overall better. So, your city council and the legal department went to great efforts to work with the plaintiffs to come up with a settlement. That is, they mediated before the judge, and they came to an agreement, something that plaintiffs agreed to and city council agrees to. The consent decree says the procedure for city council to select a new electoral system to be implemented for the November 21 municipal elections, not this fall. Nothing's changed for November. That's going to be the same. What we're talking about is establishing a system which would be put into effect 2 years from now. That consent decree provided for 4 electoral systems, one of which will be selected for implementation following a period of public debate. That's where you come in. Now, these 4 have been accepted by the plaintiffs as a proper remedy. They have said that any of these are okay with them, right? Any of those will do because they all believe they will remedy the problem. The city then needs to determine which of those is best for the city. Now here I want to note, just looking at that last phrase of that one, I don't know every case that has ever come to resolution, because ones that are resolved in this way are not famous. But I don't believe that there's ever been a remedy derived like this one with input from the citizens. Usually what happens is plaintiffs' attorneys and defendants' attorneys get together after the trial or before, and they hash out differences and they come to a decision without consulting the public. Now, there may be another case where the public was consulted in the process, but I've never heard of it. This is certainly rare and maybe unique, that your city council has decided that they can't determine this without public input. They want to know what you think. This is an important change. Any one of the changes will satisfy the Voting Rights Act, but they want you to help them determine which is the best system. Notice, for legal reasons, the ultimate decision is the city council's, not the public's. But the city council wants your input. So I want that to be clear so nobody can think, well, they can ignore us. Yes, they can. But legally, they have to be the one to make the decision with your input. And I think they are open to that. From the very beginning, the council has been flexible, as have plaintiffs. If they weren't, we would not have a resolution at this point. Okay, so timeline. September 3rd, final date for City Council to narrow from four systems to two. The agreement calls for the citizens to vote on one of two options. So now we have four. The City Council needs to narrow it down to two, and then you'll vote for those two in November. November 5th, the two finalists will be voted on. All of you registered voters, I assume you're all registered voters. You can choose which one you want. And on December 3rd, the City Council will make a final choice of one of the two, and that will be implemented for the election 2 years from now. Am I clear so far? That's background. All right. Nobody's going, so I guess that's good. Okay. All right. Options. There are four potential kinds of options. District-based representation. That's simply where you're going to draw districts, and we'll talk about how many in a minute, but you're going to draw districts, and every district elects one person. That's the district representation. It's very common, and of course that's the way your state legislature is organized, the way Congress is organized. It's very common. Hybrid. A lot of cities don't like having everybody elected from districts or everybody elected at large, so they want some of both, a kind of a balance. That's very common. Ranked choice voting. We'll talk about that, and we'll have a nice video with animals to help show you how that works. You'll see that in a minute. Fourth, a three-district representation with ranked choice voting, a kind of a hybrid of several things, and we'll talk about that as well. And again, the voters will narrow that down to two. We'll narrow it down to two before the vote. The vote then will be on those two, and the City Council will pick one of those two. Okay, very simple. District-based representation, we divide the city into 9 districts. Every district elects one council member. Very simple to understand. At least 2 of the districts would be majority-minority. If a single-member district system is going to remedy the Voting Rights Act, then there have to be some districts where minority citizens clearly have a reasonable opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. They've got to run, they've got to get votes, but those districts are ones in which they have a reasonable opportunity to win, which is not currently present, according to the statistics, in the at-large system. At least 2 of the districts would be majority-minority. Okay. Now, school committee. This is new to me, that you've tied the school committee to the City Council in some ways. But it's very interesting, and for all of these arrangements, you have to figure out, what are you going to do with the school committee? Well, if you have 9 districts, what you're going to do is this. You would have, divide the 9 districts into 3 groups. So there'd be 3 districts here, 3 districts here, 3 districts here. So you essentially create 3 districts from 3 city council districts in each of them. So you go from 9 to 3. And each of the 3 combined larger districts would then elect 2 school board members. And the mayor would, as is true now, serve as the 7th member. So that works out pretty well. That's kind of neat. At least one of those combined 3 districts for school board would be one of the combined school districts would be majority-minority. Now, notice we're talking about drawing districts. That means using census data to divide up the city. That would have to be done this first time on the 2020 census, which should be available April of 2021. And right after that, the city would have either an internal person or hire an expert from out to draw the districts that are required. That would have to be then adopted by City Council, and that would have to be redone every 10 years after the census. I've looked at your city. I don't think that that will be difficult. And it looks to me, from what I've seen, that the districts that would be drawn would not be ugly. You've seen ugly ones in the paper, surely. You know, they look like a bug splat on your windshield. Okay? You're not going to have to do that. The way the population's distributed here, I think these would be reasonably compact districts, which would be pretty when you look at them on a map. Okay. But again, some cities like to have some at-large and some districts. So some candidates for a hybrid representation, some candidates would be elected at-large, and some would be elected by districts. And you'd have a choice to run either in a district or at-large. So if I want to run for city council, I might run in my district, or I might think, no, there's somebody there already who's better than me, or at least more popular, so I'll run at large. So you would have a choice. Also, there would be some people who would be representing just like neighborhoods, and some people would see their role as representing the whole city. Voters would vote for their candidate of choice among those running within the district, and the highest vote getter in each district would become the representative. Voters will also vote for their representative in the at-large. Okay, so again, that's fairly obvious stuff, I think. Okay, I keep forgetting that I got to do this stupid microphone. I'm used to a lavalier mic where I can wander, okay, like the mayor did, but I'm stuck here. Okay, now, although we're counting one of the types as the hybrid representation, there are three possible options of the hybrid. I know this makes it a little more complicated, but stick with me. Okay. One would be an 8-1 system, that is 8 districts and 1 at large. Okay, that's fairly understandable. Another one would be an 8-3 system, 8 districts and 3 at large. Okay, now my math skill is not great, but if I'm not mistaken, that's 11. Okay, so that particular option involves increasing the size of your city council. Can that be done? Yes, it can. As part of a settlement, the court can increase the size of city council. As part of an agreement, that is, the plaintiffs and the defendants agree to this. The judge says, yes, he agrees with it, he could do it. Hybrid 7-2, 7 districts and 2 at large. In each case, there would be 2 districts that would be majority-minority. You'll notice that it doesn't go down to 6 and 3, right? Or 5 and 6, because 7 districts is the minimum number of districts that could be drawn, and from the plaintiff's perspective, have 2 of them be minority districts. So that's why it ends at 7. So it's 8 or 7 districts with 1, 3, or 2 at large. In order to draw, okay, I got that one, got that point. Okay, next. What are you going to do with the school committee? And I know there are members of the school committee here, so you're interested in that, right? Yeah, okay. So if it's an 8 districts, the 8 districts would be combined in groups of 2. Okay, 2 districts here, 2 districts here, to create 4 school committee districts that would each elect 1 member. Okay, and at least one of those school committee districts would be majority-minority. 2 members would be elected at large, and the mayor would also serve. Okay. School committee elections under the hybrid system with 7 districts. The 7 districts would each elect 1 member to the school committee. And the mayor, sorry about that, mayor, you're off the school committee on that one. All of these are systems which may seem complicated now, but when you go online, this presentation, not my visage, but this presentation will be on the city's website. And so you can look at it in detail and you can study it. You don't have to grasp it all right now while I'm droning on, but you have a chance to study it. All right, ranked choice voting. This is new to most of us, although, as you can see, before 1957, it was a system which you had. Anybody here who voted in 1957 or before? I'm just looking. Oh, no, I don't think so. All right. Well, ask your grandparents. They can tell you. Ranked choice is sometimes called proportional representation. And other jurisdictions who use it, Cambridge uses it, Minneapolis and Minnesota, and there are various smaller jurisdictions throughout the country that use it. Recently, the state of Maine adopted something which is very similar, and so it's something that's coming about. Okay. In pure ranked choice voting, if you were to copy what Cambridge does, all the candidates would run at large. So you would continue to have at-large voting just like you have now. No matter where you live in the city, you can run, and you're running at large, and all the voters can vote for you or not. But voters may vote may vote for as many candidates as they wish, but they must rank them. So I like this guy first, I like this woman second, I like this woman third, I like this guy fourth, and so forth, down to however many candidates there are. So if there were 24 candidates running, you could rank them 1 to 24. Would you do that? I doubt it. I doubt it. I doubt anybody does that. Okay, because you'd have to know an awful lot about 24 different candidates in order to be able to judge them that way. Interesting factoid. In your elections recently, you remember when you go to vote now, you can vote for 9. But the average is 5 or 6. Okay, that's the median number. Undoubtedly, some of you vote for 9, and some may go and just single-shot vote for themselves. But the average is 5 or 6. Okay, so people are going to vote for 1 to 24 and rank them. They're probably not. That's your choice. But whatever candidates you vote for, you have to rank them, which one is first and second and so forth. Now, the voting is not only different in the sense that you have to rank them, but the way in which it is counted is differently. To win a seat, a candidate must win a certain proportion of the votes, which is called the threshold or the quota. For your elections, where you're going to be electing 9 at large, the threshold is the number of votes, the number of people who are voting, divided by the number of seats plus 1, and that's 9 plus 1, which is 10, and that works out to 10%. So in the ranked choice system, if you can get 10% of the people to put you number 1, you're in. Could you do that? Probably not. As we'll see, there's other ways to get in beside that, but that's the basic idea. Voters are counted in multiple rounds, and we're going to have a video to show that. And excess votes are transferred once a candidate reaches the threshold. Because the threshold to win for seats is lower, 10%, when you're electing 9, minority groups have a better opportunity to elect candidates of choice. And that's what's happened in Cambridge and other places that have used it. It's very clear that this provides opportunities for minority candidates to win. It also provides opportunity for other kinds of minorities to win. Let's say there's some group out there, let's call them Presbyterians, who have decided that they want Presbyterians on the council, and they're 10% of the voters. If they're organized, they can put a Presbyterian on council. This is open. The way people decide to vote and how they form different coalitions is open in this kind of system. Okay, is this going to work? All right. This is a video from Cambridge.
The Cambridge Cambridge City Council elections are coming up, and we want you to know how to vote. Unlike most elections in the U.S. that practice a winner-take-all electoral process, Cambridge uses proportional representation, also known as ranked choice voting. This means Cambridge voters rank their top choices on their ballots. It seems simple enough, right? But what happens after that is where things get a little tricky. Let's use an example to explain how votes are counted. Say there are 10 candidates running for 5 seats on the Zoo Council. Registered voters cast their ballots and their number 1 votes are counted. Here are the standings after the first round. 100 ballots were cast in total, so we use this number to determine the minimum threshold or quota for a seat on the Zoo Council. The 100 ballots are divided by the number of seats, 5, plus 1. 100 divided by 6 equals 17. So once a candidate has 17 votes, she has been elected to the Zoo Council. Blake Bear has 23 number 1 votes, so she is awarded her seat right away. But she only needed 17 votes to meet the quota. Those 6 surplus votes aren't helping her, so they get transferred to those voters' number 2 choice, Taylor Tiger, bringing her total to 16. Leslie Lyon got 17 number 1 votes, so she wins her seat right away too. No one else has 17 votes yet, so now we begin eliminating candidates from the bottom up. Maddie Monkey has the fewest number 1 votes, so her votes get transferred to their number 2 choice, Emma Elephant. Emma's total becomes 14, and we repeat the process with the next lowest number 1 vote getter, Zola Zebra. Zola's supporters were split on their number 2 choice, so her votes get split accordingly. 2 votes go to Emma Elephant, and 2 go to Franny Fox. They are now tied at 16 each. Patty Parrott's 5 votes are not enough to get her a seat on the Zoo Council, so now they're transferred as well. 1 vote goes to Emma Elephant, 2 votes go to Franny Fox, and 2 votes go to Jermaine Giraffe. Franny Fox now has 18 votes, so she's elected, and her surplus vote is transferred to the number 3 choice on that ballot, Jermaine Giraffe. With 1 seat left to fill, Roxy Rhino has the next fewest number 1 votes, and her votes are transferred to their number 2 choice. Roxy and Leslie Lyon campaigned together, so all of Roxy's supporters chose Leslie as their number 2. But Leslie already has all the votes she needs, so Roxy's 6 surplus votes are transferred to their number 3 choice, Taylor Tiger. With those votes, Taylor hits quota and wins the 5th seat on the Zoo Council. The new Zoo Council is made up of Blake Bear, Leslie Lyon, Emma Elephant, Franny Fox, and Taylor Tiger. Cambridge City Council elections work the exact same way, except with people, not animals. There are 9 City Council seats, and on election day, Cambridge residents rank their top choices. In the 2015 City Council election, the quota was 1,786 votes. I hope this helps you feel better informed about the voting process in Cambridge.
It does or it doesn't. It's something to think about. But one of the things to remember is that it's counted these days by computer. You're going to have a ballot that can be read by a computer, and it'll all be put in, and that'll all happen. I can't imagine how this was done before the days of computers. But you did it here before 1957. So there must have been a bunch of people sitting at tables passing these things around to figure out how to do it. From the voter's perspective, it's only the ranking thing which is difficult. And again, the voter will simply rank as many people as they're comfortable with. They might know 4 people, rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, and stop. But if you study that, you will see it's to your advantage to rank as many people as possible so that your vote will continue to count. But you can only do that if you're still voting for people that you want to rank, people that you care about. And that may only be a half dozen or so people, maybe even less. Here's another example of it. This is somewhat artificial because I'm pretending this is a single member system. We're going to elect 1 candidate here, and we've got 3 candidates, Abel, Betty and Charlie. I like people. I like animals too, but I wanted Monkey to win, and that didn't go far. So people voted, and this particular voter liked candidates B first, candidate A second, and candidate C third. But let's say that in this election, 40% of the voters voted for A, 40% for B, and only 20% for C. So C then becomes eliminated, and C's second place votes for either A or B would be allocated to them, and then one of them would win a majority. And for a single member district system, the quota, remember we talked about the quota a minute ago, is in fact a majority. Okay. Fourth option, 3 district representation. Combines elements of both district-based representation and ranked choice voting. Under this system, 3 relatively large districts would be created. Okay, so these are much larger, 3 times as large as when you do 9 members. Okay, so just 3 big districts. And voters in each district would elect 3 candidates for the city council and 2 candidates for the school committee, in both cases by ranked choice voting. Now, you say, but we just talked about this ranked choice. It's really very different if you're doing a ranking where you're only going to elect 3. When you're electing 9, it's kind of complicated. But if you're only electing 3, it becomes really much more simple. Both the counting is more simple, the number of candidates who will be running is going to be many fewer, and you'll go through many fewer processes of trying to allocate those votes. But still, the ranked choice voting allows for minorities to have a say in the process. 3 city council seats and 2 school board committee seats from each district. And that idea is really very innovative. There may be somebody someplace who has something similar to that, but that's an innovative suggestion. Voters will rank the candidates running in their district in the order of preference because it's ranked choice voting. Within each district, the top 3 candidates for city council and top 2 candidates for school committee would get their seats. The same principle of proportional representation is involved. Same idea. Okay. Now again, the city council wants to make sure you understand they are not endorsing any of these. They will make a decision because that's what the agreement is about. But they're not trying to influence you to do one or another as a city council. Now, individual city council members may already have made their decision, but as a council, they're waiting to hear from you. I think we've gone over that. But let's look at advantages and disadvantages. Okay, let's look at district voting. And we've got various options of district voting, but they all have many of these advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at advantages. It offers direct representation for specific neighborhoods, specific parts of the city. It's very simple. You've got a series of candidates in your district, you vote for one. Lowers the barrier to entry. And I think this is a rather important part. People who would never run citywide will run in a district. Costs less. They're running in their neighborhood, so it's more likely to be people they know, people who know them. It makes a big difference. For example, when you go to district elections, often women are more likely to run. Okay? That's just something that happens. It lowers the barrier to entry, and because it does cost less. Disadvantages. The primary disadvantage of district elections is once you've got an incumbent, she is in there, and she is going to be really difficult to get rid of. Yeah. So you know, if you're looking just for competition, If you're looking just at the question of whether the voter has a lot of different reasonable options, you're going to get more of that at large than you are in the district. That's clearly the case. There may be disproportionate focus on neighborhood issues. Some people believe, and I will note without any evidence, that district representatives become so focused on their neighborhood that they don't see the wider interests of the community. In my experience, that's not necessarily so. And I've also seen experiences where people who are elected at large see their neighborhood first. So, you know, it's not clearly that that makes a difference, but it may. Some members of the district may feel that their geographic representative does not represent their principles or interess. If you have a district representative and he's not the guy you voted for, and you don't like what he's doing, you can feel disenfranchised. Whereas at large, you can probably find somebody among the 9 that you liked and feel that that person represents you. Line drawing has to be done every 10 years. It can be subject to challenges, and it can be something that people fight over. In my experience in local government, sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure whether it mostly happens or mostly doesn't, but it's certainly a possibility. Now, what you'll notice here is something that can be an advantage can also be seen by other people as a disadvantage, right? The district representative can focus on his neighborhood and represent that neighborhood. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on how you look at it. All right, what about this at-large ranked business? Elected officials are answerable to all the voters and not a subset. People get to vote based on principles and interests, not necessarily geography. Am I running over?
Sorry. Okay, just quickly, if anyone parked in the Rite Aid spots, which is over by Rite Aid Pharmacy, they're marked, they did call a tow truck. The police officer is out there, but I just want to let anybody know, you may want to move your car either to the other side of the building, but if you're in a Rite Aid spot, I hate to interrupt, but I don't want anybody towed. So, you all set? Okay. Never mind. The police department took care. We're all set, Steve? Okay, never mind. Come back. I just didn't want anybody going out and say, "Where's my car?" Thank you so much.
This is just a test.
Carry on.
Yeah. I don't have a complete census, but I think most of you did come back. That may say something about me. All right. At-large ranked. You can vote for all of the people. And remember, when you have district representation, what you are saying is that geography is the most important aspect. You're saying that's the most important thing. And that makes some sense, because what does city government do? It allocates resources to neighborhoods, water, garbage, so forth and so on. So that makes some sense that geography would be important. But with an at-large system, people can vote according to geography. That's called friends and neighbors. I'm going to vote for her. She's my next-door neighbor, by golly. That's fine. But you can also vote for other reasons. There may be more incentive to pursue development and projects for the city as a whole. Okay, that's possible. But again, I think that varies a lot. Ranked choice voting is designed to elect people proportionately to the preferences of the electorate. And the evidence is that in ranked choice voting systems, you do get a wider range of different kinds of people on the council. If that's what you want, then that's good. Some people may not want that. That also means the council may take longer to make decisions. You see, what's good may be bad in some ways. Okay, disadvantages. Districts and smaller geographic areas do not have someone in their corner. That's my guy on city council. I know because he's from my district. And by golly, when something comes up that's important to my neighborhood, he's the guy I'm going to call, right? Who do you call if it's an at-large system? Well, you could call any of them, but if you didn't have a contact with any of them, would they listen to you? But if it's your district rep, he probably listens to you. That's the idea. The counting procedure is more complex than straightforward tallying. There may be less focus on neighborhood issues and more concern about the city as a whole, and more resources may be required to run citywide. Okay. Now again, my job here was just to give you some of the facts based on my experience and my training. But you need to look at this carefully, look at it on the internet, study it a little bit, think about what your values are. Think about how you think your values will fit better for one of these systems or another, and then advise the city council accordingly. They're waiting for your input. Okay? All right. Questions? All right. Somebody's going to have to go out with a mic. I have my ears plugged in, but even so.
I understand your presentation correctly. We're going to be asked to vote on districts without knowing what the geographical looks like.
That is correct. The question is that you would be asked, if the district representative was one of the options in November, that you would be asked to vote on that or vote against it without knowing what the districts would look like, how they would be drawn. That's right, because this is for the election starting in 2021, and so by law they will have to use the new census. So yeah, you are correct.
So my understanding is reading the consent decree, there's going to be one individual, so-called independent expert, that's going to make that decision.
That's correct. Do we have the 8-district plan that plaintiffs put together is available? Can we put that online?
What will be online is actually just the presentation.
Just that, okay. I don't think there's any way to solve that because they're going to have to use, if they do go to districts, they're going to have to use the 2020 census, and that's simply not available. But, you know where the Hispanics and the Vietnamese live within the city. You know you're going to have to carve either the one of the 3 districts around that. I think you could pretty well take 10 or 15 knowledgeable citizens and they could look at where the neighborhoods are and figure out just about where those districts are going to go. But not exactly, because you're going to have to wait for the new census. So you are right. In a sense, you've got a pig in the poke.
There's a rumor in the city, probably you'd like to comment on it, that 11 plaintiffs filed a suit against the city. Could you tell me how many of those live in Lowell and how many registered voters?
How many people live in Lowell?
Of the 11 plaintiffs.
All the 11 plaintiffs live in Lowell. All 11 plaintiffs live in Lowell. They have to. Yeah. Or they would have been excluded. That's a requirement under the law. The plaintiffs have to have an interest themselves, which means in this case they have to be residents and voters in Lowell.
I have a question about the ranked choice. I wasn't clear. If somebody makes the threshold of the number 1 votes, and so you said those extras would go to the number 2 votes, how do you decide which ones of those? Because you could have a certain number of people who vote number 1. How do you pick which ones of the extras?
Okay. I voted number 1 for the guy who got elected. And she also voted for the guy that got elected, okay. But I voted for her number 2, so my vote then goes to her. She voted for him number 2, so her number 2 goes to her.
There's only excess votes.
Right.
Just the excess. Just the excess. They're allocated at the time.
Which ones are the excess?
right. First thing that happens, if somebody's got the quota, their extra votes are allocated. Oh, I see what you're asking. It's done on a percentage basis. Okay? It's done on a percentage basis. I'm sorry, I misunderstood what you were asking. Okay. Well, okay. You're saying that the go ahead.
As I'm researching what I understand, there are two different ways that those extra votes can be allocated. One is that, say there are 100 extra votes, and they're spread over the whole number of votes registered for the candidate that has the extra votes. And however many votes there were in total, you would go like every fifth vote in the order that they were counted. That's what they do in Cambridge, according to their website. So if you were taking every 10th vote, then the 10th vote that was registered for that one who went over the threshold comes out and the 2 vote comes. Then the 20th vote, then the 30th vote, then the 40th vote, like that. That's how Cambridge does it, according to their website. Then there's another way that Dick Howe explained to me earlier, is that all of the votes will be counted again, but they will be allocated as a percentage, so that each second choice vote would be like 10% of the vote instead of a whole vote. So they would all be counted, and that would leave nothing to random, but it wouldn't be a whole vote. And those are the 2 things that I know.
Fortunately, we plain voters don't have to figure all that out. We just have to rank the candidates and submit our ballot. But go ahead, Rachel.
Elaborate on what you're saying. So the number 1 voters for a particular person, you look at all of their second choices and say 40% of those second choices were for person A, then those get transferred. 40% of that number goes to person A. If 40% of the votes were for person C, then 40% of that whole number that voted for the first person goes to person C. And it's all done through the computer software.
Yeah, fortunately, the computer can do that and can allocate them all by percentage.
It shows that ranking way of doing things would be what, maybe 3 or 4 weeks before you really find out who won. And everyone would be fighting to find out if they were mistreated or not. That's my comment, but my question is, will it be a requirement for a candidate to live in the district if that person is running for district rep? Do they have to live in that district?
Has that been decided?
I don't have the microphone, but the agreement is,
You got a legal question.
the agreement is silent on that. And that is something that can be further addressed between the plaintiffs and the council as we go through it. But there isn't, as of yet, a requirement that for the districts, you would have to live in the district in which you want. Well, it could be that somebody could represent a district and then they could move, and again, we're in a city, they could be just outside the district, and ultimately it would be up to the voters. If it was important to the voters in that district to have a representative of the district that lives in the district, they could do that.
So what's the point of even having a district then? If they're going to be...
Wait. Let's get a microphone if you want to ask a question. You come on over.
Thank you. The question comes out after joining the districts. How can you guarantee that there will be no open avenue for gerrymandering?
How can we guarantee that what?
That won't open up for gerrymandering.
But there won't be gerrymandering, but there'll be an expert, obviously.
You can't guarantee against that. The city council will adopt the districts, but by the agreement, they have to draw the required majority-minority districts. That's in the agreement. Beyond that, the way they draw the districts is the way they decide to draw the districts. And the public simply needs to say, you need to draw those districts in a way that respects neighborhoods, that are reasonably compact, and that makes sense to the citizens. And that's all you can do. But it will not be gerrymandered to deprive the minority of those 2 districts. That's in the agreement. It has to be done that way. And the court will make sure it's done. There's this.
I think you did a really good job of presenting that. However, my head is spinning right now, and so many questions come into it that I don't even know where to begin. But the one thing I'll say, and I guess I'm addressing this not to you, but to my city council here, is that I've lived in Lowell my whole life. I've lived in South Lowell, I live in Highlands, I've lived in Centerville, I have family that lives in different parts of Lowell. To break up my city into districts, that makes me afraid. I don't like that concept of breaking up my city. Because to me right now, this is like my city. And I might have lived here, but I've worked here, and I traveled here, and I don't feel that a division is necessary. The other thing I worry about is, like you said, gerrymander. I worry about someone coming into my city and deciding how to cut it out. And I also worry about the integrity of an election that requires that sophisticated mathematical stuff that went on, and that concerns me as to who structures it, how do you validate those results. So those are just some of my concerns.
There's members of the city council present. I'm sure they heard you.
I guarantee you that the mathematics behind it are much more complicated than he presented. I have a couple of comments. One is the Cambridge system. It seems to me you can win or lose by a tenth of a vote. And if you want the city divided, let's have somebody who lost by a tenth of a vote and see what happens. The second one is you said early on that the majority would be white. Okay, now suppose sometime in the future there's enough immigration and 70% of the population of Lowell is non-white. Does that mean then the whites become the minority, must be guaranteed seats? Or does white stay the majority no matter how many there are? And thirdly, in terms of what you mentioned gerrymandering, you may remember North Carolina back in the 70s, that they were ordered to draw a congressional seat to guarantee the election of an African American. And there's this little spaghetti thing that went from Raleigh all the way down almost to Charlotte, which it actually did, but now a couple of decades later, that's called dumping. And so it's out of favor. And so, I don't know how you defend against that, but that's an issue that could easily come up in the drawing of the districts.
Let me comment on your second point because I think it's important. I have argued in various jurisdictions where I've worked that the white majority in a place where the minority is increasing in numbers should be grateful if they go for some system that provides for minority representation, because they just might be the minority. And so, you know, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, to mix a metaphor.
Okay, I have a question. As far as we have a large district, now we have somebody at large and somebody district. Is it going to be like one person doing a lot of work? Are they going to have more power? Are they going to get paid? Because you see, one's at large, they do so many more people. Everything, you know, take care of more people. Is it going to be the same? Is it going to be equal votes on the council? I mean, what's the story there? You know, how about the kid? Is it going to be equal?
There's no provision in any of these for members of the council to have fractional votes. And that's probably illegal under Maryland law, but...
Should that be the people vote, saying that you're going to put more debt to the people in the city of Lowell? They should know you want to put more councilors or more, you know, how much it's going to cost, right? Well, the cost of each one of those should be applied to the ballot so people can vote to see, you know, what they want.
I think,
No, go ahead.
I've been to a couple of these meetings, and I'm not sure if I understood you correctly on one point that you made. The city council will select 2 options to go on the ballot for December. After that, on December 3rd, they will pick one of those 2 or one of the 4.
No, one of the 2. One of the 2 that they put on the ballot in November will be the one that they will select in December.
Okay. Can I ask why you're not putting 6 options on the ballot? 6 options to the school committee, to the council, to pick, and just 4?
The short answer is because this was the timeline and the procedure agreed to from the mediation. Did you want to say anything else, or just, I mean, it was a complicated process of mediation, and this is what was agreed to. Yeah, this guy. You've been very patient.
Hi. Thus far, I am unaware of any representatives of the plaintiffs being here. My understanding thus far.
Someone has raised their hand.
I'm sorry.
Someone has raised their hand. It's plaintiff.
Okay. I would be very, very interested to know from either the plaintiffs or their counsel which of these options the plaintiffs would prefer. Granted, in the agreement leading up to this, they said all of these would be acceptable, but I would think there might be something they might like more than something else. Is there anybody who can address this? Either plaintiffs or plaintiffs' counsel?
Let me address it in this way. As plaintiffs, they do not have a preference. As plaintiffs, that is, as part of this agreement, they've said these are all okay. As individual voters, undoubtedly they may have a particular preference, but that's not the preference of the plaintiffs as a group which brought this suit. They're tied in with this agreement, and they've said any of these are okay. As individuals, my man at the back there has a preference. He's an individual voter, and his preference is his individual preference. It's not the preference of the legal entity called plaintiffs. Is that fair? Yeah.
So on the ballot, you said that the city council had to pick 2 of those choices and that you were going to vote on. Now, whichever has the majority of votes, they don't have to pick that one, correct? It's whatever the city council decides?
They have to pick one of the 2 that are voted on in November, yeah.
But it doesn't go with the majority of the votes that us voters pick, correct?
That's correct, and there's a legal reason for that. Legally, only the city council can make this decision because they're the defendants. And so they have to be the ones to make that decision. They cannot legally be committed to following the vote in November. They may follow the vote in November because they think that's the right thing to do, but they cannot be legally committed to doing it.
Just to add on to that just a bit, the consent decree, however, does speak to the great deference being given to the vote. But again, the ultimate discretion and the ultimate decision is left with the council.
Real quick, if option 2 is one of the ones that goes on to the hybrid, is one of the ones that goes on the ballot, there are 3 options within that. Do we get to choose one of the options, or do we just choose hybrid and the council would pick?
No, the city council will determine, if they determine that option 2 is going to be one of the ones on the ballot in November, it will be specific as to allocation of between seats and at large. That's not going to be a pig and a poke like my friend here is concerned about with regard to the maps.
Thanks for your presentation. As much as you've taken much time to explain, I'm still very confused. For all the options, I was wondering, is there any way that you can prevent like term limits from someone from just winning a district and being there forever? Like a candidate in a district that would not be able to give opportunity for other new competitive candidates.
Is term limits a possibility?
Not in this process. I mean, these are the options that have been agreed upon, and term limits is not part of any of that. That's a separate question, which is allowed under Massachusetts law, and you can pursue that in whatever ways you want, but that's not part of this process.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding something correctly. Is it true that the council is going to pick the two options that are going to be on the ballot, and then the council is also going to pick on which of the two options we go with, so the council is picking?
The November vote is advisory. That's all it can be by the law. And if you're really concerned about that, as it gets to that vote, you tell your council members, all of them, all 9 of them are yours, that you want them to follow the vote. But you better know what that vote is. Okay?
Good evening, Adam Hutchinson. On the rank and file 3, I believe that's option 4. Is there a possibility that candidate or the top vote getter could get voted out if they didn't get 51%? That number 2 or 3, could that be mathematically possible? That the number 1 could get ousted? Thank you.
No. If you get up to the quota in any of those iterations of allocating the votes, you're in until 9 have been selected.
I got kind of a two-part to the same question. Should one of these, as a choice of at-large, be adopted? Depending on what you're seeing, how do people go about saying, this is okay if we vote for a large, we as a community, as a city, as a town, want to adjust this for something like term limits or for in this district, we want them to reside within our district or within center. Can we amend that, have that put in the act of fact?
Yeah.
So how do we do it?
Yeah. Yes.
How do we do it?
We could just. Thanks. If there were further changes that needed to be done, they could be done either by amending the consent decree if that was necessary, or there may be other changes that would just be allowable by law regardless of whatever system that you have, such as term limits.
How would we agree to say, we want this,
You could, many different ways. You could present a petition before the city council, or you could start a petition. There'd be lots of different ways of, I guess, vocalizing that to councilors.
You see, if you ask legal questions, I right away go to the expert. Otherwise, I get in trouble for practicing law without a license.
And I think this falls on this as well. This silent districting, how's that work? We're asking, just last week, it was motion made to add another step into this, or add another 5th option. This isn't really asking for an option. Add in that it can't be a silent partner. You can't be live in South Lowell and run for South Lowell on the acre or whatever. I don't know how we're going to call them districts and have other people from other parts of the city run in a district that they don't live in. That's something that needs to be addressed. I don't think it's another option. It's something that should be thrown into those options, I believe, and I don't really see that as something that's going to hold up the process. But I would ask common city councilors to make that motion in the next coming meeting to try to get that thrown into the option 2 or whatever the redistricting options are. Thank you.
It's still to be determined, as I understand it, whether people, if they go with districts, whether the person will have to be a resident of that district or not. That's evidently an option. Yeah, I know. In most places in the country where there are districts for city, state, county, whatever, you have to live in the district. But I don't know that that's universal. I mean, it's, sure. If you want carpetbaggers, you can have them. Right? Okay. But. Okay. When that detail is filled in, and I assume that it will be, if the districts, here's my recommendation. If one of the districted options is one of the ones you'd vote for in November, it would be very useful, I would think, to specify whether the rep has to live in the district or not. I mean, I just think for public information.
Just with any other type of district, voting area or anybody that has districting, isn't that how it generally goes?
I hear you. I hear you. And the city council hears you. That's more important.
I have a question about the ranked choice when you gave the presentation. I know there's a lot more smarter people than I am. 100 people in that group, that example, right? You had 5 slots, and it said that you take the total number of votes, the total number of seats, you divide it, and then you add 1. Then you get 16. 100 divided by 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21. How does that work? How did that example, that was wrong. So the example that was given to us doesn't work. So we have to have faith in the system that you can't even get the math.
But if you're talking about what's on the slide?
Yeah, that slide up there. The video said 100 divided by 5 seats. 5? No. It said 100 divided by 5. But the way it was presented up there, mathematically, you do division before you do addition and subtraction. So,
all right, but
if it is, that's something that's going to be a problem. We have to have these things specific. We have to be exactly right. And I think that's part of the reason why people are saying if you don't live in the area, you need to have that in there. I agree with you. Congressmen do it all the time. Why wouldn't people running for Lowell City Council or school committee?
All right, 100. And there are 5 seats, which 5 plus 1 is 6. 6 divide is 16.666, which as I counted is pretty close to 17.
He's putting the bracket in the wrong place.
You mean on them?
Dividing by 5 and then adding 1. Divide by 5 to 20 and add 1 to 21.
But he's talking about Cambridge.
He's talking about Cambridge.
Yeah. I'm not responsible for Cambridge. Okay. As I said, I voted for the monkey and he got eliminated right away. But the figure of 17% is correct. It is the number of people voting divided by the number of seats plus 1. And that's the quota. And you have to get more than that to be elected. 1 vote more than that to be elected. And for a vote of 5, it's 17%. By the way, if you're electing 3, because we're talking about some districts with 3, it's 25%. And it's the same thing. The number of voters, 100, divided by 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 into 100 is 25. Okay? 25%.
So,
But never mind, go ahead.
I think this is a legal question. Over here. Christine? And I don't think you know the answer, but you give us some guidance. In a system that has districts, whether it be the hybrid or all districts, what happens if a vacancy occurs after the election? How does that get filled? Does it get filled?
It would get filled the same way as it is at large. If the provision is that at large it can be filled temporarily by the rest of the council, then they can do that in the district. If they have to wait till the next election or have a special election, then it's the same. Whatever the rule is, it would be the same for at large and district, whatever that rule happens to be.
Well, currently the rule is if someone dropped out, the next one in line would go in. So I would assume that would fall within the same realm of the district. If someone was to either pass away or to drop out.
I think the question had to do with somebody dying or resigning, and you're talking about what happens in the election, right?
After the election, if someone was to leave one of the districts.
Curtis and I are going to tag team. The base of my question was if there's a vacancy on the regional school committee, it's not the next person in line, it's the council and the school committee that elect a successor. Right. So would it be that? Would it be the next in line? And if it was the next in line, what if there was only one person that ran in the election?
So the school committee is governed by its own enabling legislation, as well as another consent decree. With respect to our election, however, if we had a district system and a candidate, say, resigned, then it would go to the next candidate. If there wasn't a second candidate, then we would have to call for a new election. Special election.
How does this consent decree that we are dealing with now, this is a question. How does this consent decree we are dealing with now impact upon the consent decree that the school department is being handled right now?
Did you get that? That sounds like a legal question.
What is the effect of this consent decree on the existing consent decree that I think you just mentioned?
The consent decree that I was referring to applies to the Greater Lowell Regional Vocational School. And that had to do with a one-man, one-vote violation brought forth by the city of Lowell and resulted in a change to the way the voting took place. As a result, Lowell today has a greater representation on the Greater Lowell Regional Vocational Board than it did prior to the lawsuit.
I appreciate your presentation, and I would request that, if it's okay with you, could the city of Lowell add your advantages and disadvantages pages from your presentation to their website?
Sure.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, that's going to happen. That's going to happen. And I've been on television here, and so all of my commentary is going to be available as well. So it can be studied in detail. My students never did that, so I would be surprised that you would, but okay.
Just a quick add-on to that. Everything that was on the presentation will be added to the web page, as well as translations for each.
Question related to the timing. I heard correctly during the presentation, the census data in the 2020 census will be available in April of 2021. And for one of the district-based options, that kind of runs up close to the traditional election cycle where nominations will become available in June and primary season. So I wondered if there was any thought into how the timing would work and whether that would be the drug districts and allow candidates time to think about what they're doing.
That hasn't been determined yet because the city council hasn't had to draw districts before. If one of the options chosen is one involving districts, they will have to set up a timetable for how to go about getting those done. And it varies. Some jurisdictions do it quite quickly, and some jurisdictions may take a few months to do it. But you figure they have to get it done by about midsummer in order for the filing and all of that stuff for the new election to take place. I'm not sure what that first date is, but they'd have to do it before then. And if they did not do that, so that there was some delay in the 2020, in the 2021 election, the judge would be less than happy.
I know when it comes time to election times, a lot of the electorate is not so-called politically astute, but I think it should be mandated that you live in the district. And people know that. And we just spoke about a vacancy. So hypothetically, if it wasn't, and the top vote get a resign, and the number two person that ran was from outside the district, I don't think it sits well with people. It doesn't sit well with me. I know the districts are more or less a popularity contest as it is, but still, it should be mandated that that person comes from the district. Because as a woman stated earlier, I've lived in my section of the city my entire life. I've all had families been in there over 100 years, so I know how it is. I think it should be mandated, and the people will get better representation.
Thank you.
Is there any thought to using another census other than the 2020 census?
No. and in most states you can't.
So the reason why I ask is because in the climate where we are right now, a lot of the minorities may not participate because of the climate. The extreme climate is still in right now. And it's important that everyone gets counted, and it's very important that yes, everybody gets counted, but I'm not sure that that's going to be as thorough and as complete as past censuses because of everything that's going on right now.
That's.
Elliot, by the way, could you introduce, that's one of our election commissioners. Maybe you could just introduce yourself.
Sorry. I am an election commissioner, actually. I'm actually the chairwoman of this 4 months ago, so it's so hard.
Thanks.
Following up on her question, I know the state allocated a lot of funding for the 2020 census. Will the city also allocate some funding or staff time for the 2020 census to happen? And everybody as she just presented?
I think legally they have no choice but to use the 2020 census. There may be problems with it, and I'm concerned about that too, but there just isn't a choice.
Yes, I know some people want, to be living in the district, and there might be some problems. But a lot of times, there's not enough people running, not even to get the primary, so we skip it. So what happens if some decides there's not enough people running, and so there might not even be enough candidates for that one particular district. So why shouldn't somebody else run? if you live in the city and you care for the city, should be no difference. And at the same time, if you live in an area, and the people that you're going to go from outside, most of the time they're going to vote for the people that live there to be good. If they're not good, why shouldn't you get somebody else if they're willing to run?
That reminds me to say something that I left out of my presentation, because I kind of go as I feel, and I didn't feel the right place for it. But what you have to remember as you're talking about here, there is no perfect system. It doesn't exist. There is no perfect system for voting. There are advantages and disadvantages to each of these options. All of them have drawbacks. So if you're looking for the perfect one, it's not there. And just think about which one you think is best.
I've got the mic, so I'll pass it on afterwards. First of all, I want to tell you that, I misread the time and the place. You guys are better than me getting them there on time. So I apologize to you and to any of the previous speakers because I missed your comments. I apologize to you for that. I heard about these ideas, okay, of district representation and proportional representation. And my first thoughts were, what in the world is going on? Okay? I ran for city council. My name is Tom Hope. I come from Maryland Avenue. People aren't doing their streets, but this is a public meeting. Okay? I ran for city council many decades ago, under the current system. And my first thoughts were, I ran, the people were, made their choice, and I lost. What? Okay? So, I was able to spend a little bit of time going through Richard Howe's, our historians, his webpage, his great information source of registered deeds. And looking at that, before me, running decades ago, these things were considered. These things were considered. So even though I was, why going to change? Okay, I think there's reasons to change. At least consider changing most of it. Okay, so that's my thought. Now, over the years, we've had people who represented citywide, or elected citywide, and they had various regional and neighborhood interests. I can think of people, I'll mention the name, Brendan Fleming. He had a great love for the city, and he had a great love for the Sacred Heart area, where I was from originally. Brendan fought, he took a position which, without him losing the election. Okay? If it was district-wide, Sacred Heart area, he would never have lost an election. It was citywide. Okay? But the people in their wisdom, 2 years later, re-elected him. And if there's, I don't know, it can help you get power. If there's nothing named for Brendan Fleming in the city, there should. So that's the point. Okay. Now, in line with that, I have people have already said this, I don't know. I have understood there's a, quote, court consent decree. That means it's a court case. You get involved with court cases, people can get upset. I gotta win. I don't want to lose. If you think about it, court cases are by people. They're people. One side, another side. And perhaps I've been reading recently that the city council is, quote, rethinking the positions that they have, okay, to make a larger amount of at-large councils. So I would just sort of suggest to the plaintiffs of the case to consider that the city council may be acting in good faith, okay? And maybe it would be not a bad idea if we could all try to work together to come up with something that's satisfactory for most of us, if not all of us. Okay, so that's something I would like at least to throw out to the plaintiffs of the case to think about maybe going on with revisions. I know I've changed my mind a lot. So that's the point I would like to make. Now, the other point I would like to make, you're talking about census data and all the rest of it. Okay? Census data, my limited knowledge is to say how many people get elected, so for example. Okay, so Massachusetts census legislature decides on how many Congress people, men and women we get. Okay, now, when we looked at the old stuff that was put together by the city charter and all, they labeled it as Belvedere, Centerville, Pawtucket, or whatever. I don't think there's the same number of people living in each of those particular districts, let alone the same number of registered voters or people who could be registered as voters in those particular districts. So I think you're going to have to split regions of the city if you want to have sort of a equal representation, however you're going to do it. You're going to probably have to call them by regions and all. So I think, you know, again, you guys probably came in with a better attitude and more information than I have. But my suggestion would be, okay, I know my first instinct was, no, okay, but I'm wondering if you in your presentation have decided how the regional districts, if that's what turns out, how they're going to be selected. And I would hope it would be something not just 10-year-old data from a census, you know, that comes into play. It was going to have some way of doing it, as the lady said, to get people willing to say who they are and, you know, all the rest of it. So I don't know if you could expand more on how the districts would be, in effect, put together. Thank you.
Well, again, we don't know how the districts would be drawn on. All we know at this point is the potential number of districts, but it wouldn't be 10-year-old data. The districts would be drawn on the 2020 census, which is April 2020, and it would be available for the City Council on about April 1st, 2021. And as for your running, no, it would be one-year-old data. It'd be one-year-old data. April 2020 to April 2021. It's 1 year old. That's as quickly as the census can get it out. Now, as for running for office, I should join with you and say several decades ago, I too ran for city council, and I too got beaten, and boy, it did wonders for my sense of humility.
Hi, good evening. I just want to say something that the plaintiff went for the lawsuit is because they want to change. Change because the city of Lowell is becoming diversity. So it needs to change to give a chance to minority people to become city councilors. They need also to represent their own cultures and people. So that's what we need. We need in Lowell diversity. We need in Lowell to give a chance to the other people to become a city councilors. Before it was not like that. So that's why the plaintiff went and fight for it. And because of the settlement, it was options. So please, we have to work together. It needs to be changed. And it's going to change no matter what we say. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the presentation. I said some of my nerves are awful. So I wanted to just share two things. First, for the purposes of public education, we need as much advance notice about what the two options that are going to be on the ballot will be. So as much transparent process on behalf of the City Council that we have those options so that the public can get that information in as many languages as possible, and how we try our best to do public outreach. The second thing is that there's a statewide context that should be considered, and I hope that if you do put the advantages and disadvantages of all of the options on the city's website for this process, to consider that the ranked choice voting ballot initiative that is coming potentially to the state system is an additional option for municipalities to adopt and use on top of whatever system they have. So it's possible that if we went with a hybrid system or something else, that we would also then have the option of having a ranked choice system in addition. Or if we went with a ranked choice system, we would also have to work with what the state determined. So I just want the public to have that information also.
Thank you.
Hi, I wondered if the city council has a really big decision to make to get it down to 2 options. I wondered if we could just say out loud how you let the city council know what you think and what your preferences are.
Are you talking to me? As I said before, you're entitled to my opinion about statistics and way things work, but you're not entitled to my opinion of what would be best, because this is not my town.
I wonder if maybe the mayor or city councilor could answer the question. The question is just, if you have input about which of the options you would like to be included in the 2, what's the best way to make sure the city council knows your opinion?
I think if you had everybody raise their hand, we scatter.
You know what?
I don't think you want to do that.
No.
I was going to say, perhaps I can answer that question for you. There are several city councils here this evening. You can go on Lowell's website, lowellmass.gov, and go to the, I'm not sure exactly which section it is, but there is a slot there for all our city councilors that you can leave a memo or a note or your feelings. So I suggest that all of you here, along with everyone that's watching this presentation, to do so. Because I'm sure that all the city councilors would like to know how you feel. And I know that I'm going to bother you all. I will send you an email. And that might be something that could be put in the presentation on one of the pages. Perhaps all the emails for the city councilors. And I think that would be helpful.
So I don't see any further questions, and if that's the case, we can wrap up. Oh, okay. And as the mayor pointed out, also, actually, the mayor can come up and explain different ways you can get that communication to the members of the council. And okay, one other question.
Well, Nancy basically addressed the issue, but the thing is, look, we read our emails, okay? We go to the neighborhood group meetings, okay? So you have your neighborhood group meetings, you have email, you have our telephone numbers for the most part. Simple call. I mean, we want as much information as we possibly can get. This is not an easy issue. Ted, thank you for really a great discussion tonight. Because I think you really addressed a lot of issues that were on people's minds. But for some, it also creates other issues and other problems. But we're going to address those issues. But what I'd like to do is acknowledge that we have school committee woman Jackie Doherty here, school committee person John McLeay is here, Councilor Karen Cirillo came in. We have Registered Deeds Richard Howard and Curtis LeMay from the school, regional school committee. So thank you for being here. But do you want to continue?
There's another question.
Another question.
Bill, before you give
Yes.
up the mic, would you just let everyone know that the deadline is the 3rd of September, so that
Correct.
they really need to,
Yeah, our decision will be made.
yeah, that they need to email
Has to
you
be made,
before
yes.
then?
Yeah. Starting tonight.
Well, actually, the vote will be before this.
The vote's
Next Tuesday.
the vote's actually next Tuesday. The vote's next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
So
they
start tonight.
That's right. That's the date of the consent decree. By that date. By that date. So the next meeting would next Tuesday would be the meeting that the council could take this up.
Oh, well then. Oh, boy, yeah. Everybody. Going home, guys. 1 week.
Given that it's almost 8, this will be the last question.
Scott's the way choice, and if I was running for council, and I'm not running for council, I want your second vote, all your second votes.
That concludes the question and answer section.
Again, Eileen, going to come and help close this out. City Manager Eileen Nuttall. But again, I want to thank Eileen Nuttall and her staff, and Christina O'Connor and her staff for doing a great job tonight. Ted, thank you for coming tonight. I mean, this is a complex issue, but I think you helped break it down. There'll be a lot more discussion on this, but thank you.
Thank you all. I do want to thank the law department and acknowledge that many of them are here tonight and are also able to answer questions if you have them. As the mayor has said, please contact the city council. You can contact them through all the avenues that Nancy had just said, as well as if you need to contact through my office. We'll make sure people get the message. I think the bottom line that people do have to know, because there's been a lot of questions about do we have to change. I think after tonight, you do understand it will change. And that's why voting on November 5th and choosing an option is going to be the most important thing you can do to send the message to the council as to which one you want. I know there was some talk at one point about please go to the polls on November 5th and vote. And we will have more sessions after September 3rd up till the November election. So there'll be a lot of discussions, a lot of opportunities, and we're also looking to have a panel discussion as well that we're putting together so people can understand those options that are going to be on the ballot. So thank you. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Christine, and to the whole law department for being here tonight.